Hello everyone. Really, there are lots of us, because we've invited for this panel discussion our leaders, the leaders to the city which have already begun the process of the opening the data, so it would be very interesting to listen how they open the data. So I do invite for our discussion Vladyslav Skalskiy, who is the deputy of the head, or the mayor of the head of the city council of Vinnytsia city, Tetyana Lebukhorska, who's responsible of the opening of the data from Chernivtsi city council, Irina Koretska, the head of the IT department of Dnipro city council. Yes, there are lots of us, and Elena Hunko, who's responsible for open data of Lviv city council. But maybe with the news, we've got also a representative of the Open Data Institute, the consultant Richard Stirling. So we invite him to join us too, and he will be the first to speak. Richard, would you please tell us the good news for our cities, for all of the Ukrainian cities? Because really, there is such a nice international initiative like the Open Data Charter. So Richard will tell us a bit about that, and he'll tell the good news.
Much. I'll sit down, avoid looming. So, as you say, we've heard a lot today about national open data, and I'm delighted to be on the panel talking about the open data from cities, and also to be on a slightly more mixed panel than some of the ones earlier. It's brilliant. Now, as you said, I'm a consultant at the Open Data Institute. I'm also one of the lead stewards on the Open Data Charter. And the Open Data Charter is an international movement. It sets out some key principles that the signatories need to live up to. They need to be open by default. They need to publish their data in a timely and comprehensive fashion. It needs to be accessible and usable. It needs to be in a format that people can work with. And it needs to be comparable from place to place, so that it's very easy to build services on top and to build some of the insights and turn it into knowledge in a way that we've heard in some of the earlier panels. And that's all for improved governance, citizen engagement, and inclusive development and supporting innovation. And I'm delighted to be on stage today with 4 more cities that have signed up to be part of the Open Data Charter, and joining Lviv, who signed up, I think, a couple of months ago. And that now means that Ukraine has the 2nd highest number of cities who are members of the Open Data Charter, just after Mexico. And means you're contributing towards this global open data movement as real leaders, sharing your knowledge and learning from other cities who are going through the same change. Because the Open Data Charter is here to help people, to help the leaders in different cities achieve change, to open up their data, to support those tools and open data-powered services. So, as I say, it's a great honor to be on stage with people who are leading this charge, and I'm looking forward to hearing how you're doing and the progress that you've made.
Thank you, Richard. So I'd like to emphasize that the new cities who joined the Open Data Charter, the Dnipro City Council, let's give them a round of applause. That's Vinnytsia City Council, the Chernivtsi City Council, and Drohobych City Council. Unfortunately, they are not present here today. They have their own holidays now, but still, we do hope that the thing that they joined the Charter will give the new push for those cities in the development of open data. If we speak about those new pushes, why did you decide to join this Open Charter? I'd like to ask Mr. Vladyslav from Vinnytsia, why do you need this open data? Why do you really gonna do something, implement this charter of open data, really? Because Vinnytsia is one of the leading cities in the development of IT technologies, so there are certain services. Do you really plan to be in the leading positions with the open data too? Well, it's a very provocative question, whether we are planning to be at the leading positions, honestly. I'd like to rephrase Mr. Michael. He said that we need to be closer to our communities. Well, in fact, we are close to our communities. The problem is that we are not comprehensible and understandable for them. The main idea is to be understandable for the members of the amalgamated hromadas or communities, for this governance, not to have too many questions for this governance and about this governance. This open data is not anymore a matter of political will. It's not a question of our reserves, of our funds and storages, as for human resources, as for the politics, any other aspects. It's more of the condition of existence tomorrow. And if we speak about Vinnytsia city, really it used to be the first city in Ukraine which implemented transparent office. It was the Vinnytsia has e-governance for a long time, the internal document turnover, and so on and so on. We know what the computer is for a long time. We know what data is, and we know how to produce, accumulate, and to store this data. There is a fun fact. We've signed our desire to join the Charter on the 27th of June. As you know, the 27th of June, virus Petya came to Ukraine. So I would say that Vinnytsia City Council stored all the data. We didn't suffer, so we know what the data is from this virus. So we are sure that in the future all the decisions should be taken in the cleverest way possible. What I mean, the bigger amount of information should be simultaneously accessible to all of the people who are involved in the decision-making process. It's possible only if you have the city portal of open data, which I do hope up till the end of the year will open. Thank you so much. Maybe any other cities want to add anything? Yes, Chernivtsi, please. Well, I can divide my answer into two parts. First of all, why open data, and then why the Charter. So, today it was mentioned for multiple times, because open data is the resource. We know how to own the resource or not to own the resource. So we'd like the open data to be the resource both for the city governance process, for decision-making process, for it to be the resource for research, for scientific research, for it to be the resource for the development of new services, for the improvement of quality of life of the residents. And why the Charter? Well, we are having rather high hopes and aims, and gradually, one by one, we are achieving them. We've signed the Charter, so we named ourselves for the whole life. The Chernivtsi are ready to do that and to show in practice how to implement the principles which are declared by the Charter. So for us, it's a kind of a milestone and the direction what to do further on and how to do it. Thank you so much. As far as I know, Dnipro City Council even has its own portal of open data and even publishes the data itself. Would you please tell, how did you choose, how you chose which data to publish, and is there a certain demand among the social societies for the usage of this data? Well, in fact, working with the open data in our city, well, our work has not started for such a long time. I think since spring this year. So we decided to issue the portal in July this year. Now we are having 176 portal of open data. We chose the priority. Before we had the portal, we had lots of demand from the residents in the social networks, from the volunteers who would like to use this data to implement certain services. So, of course, we've got lots of information which needs to be seen and used by our residents. This is the information about the transport, information on the objects of communal property, the information of some financial reports. It was really complicated for us to begin the work inside the city council because the people who were working at our place, they did not understand what the open data is, how to work with it, what's the necessary format of gathering the information. So each department, each executive institution had the responsible person who gives this information, who's constantly renewing it, recovering it, depending on which type of the information, with the weekly data or monthly information. So we are trying constantly, we're searching what more we can open, what would be useful for our residents. On the website of Open Data, we made the feedback form for people to write their applications, what kind of data they'd like to see. And in the future, we'd like to see the implemented services either by our residents or the volunteers or by the programmers who would be able to show a certain visual, wholesome picture of a certain activity. For now, by our city council, we've implemented one service on the open map of the city, which has 19 layers, beginning with the stops, transport stops, the objects of maintenance, objects of communal property, when a person can come to this portal and see where the kindergarten is, to find some information, to write a complaint. So we do hope that in the future we'll create more new, cool solutions which would help our residents. Thank you so much, Irina. Very often, the representatives of the authorities think that this data they have is their data. Why should we share with some civil society? We are working with this data, we are creating this data. But one of the first principles of the Open Data Charter is the openness by default. Everything which is being created by the local authorities in the communication with the local authority and the business should be open by default. So Lviv City Council is trying to go alongside this path. Even before entering the charter, they even had these principles used, and Olena is communicating with the representatives of authorities and explains them that these data is not theirs, it's ours. The information about the roads, the transport, the communications, local communications, but the budget and so on, it should be published and in the format which would be useful for processing by the program complexes, right? Olena, please tell us how easy it is to communicate about the open data in the local authorities, and what do you need to begin this process? Organizational stuff, some maybe technical ones. How difficult it is to begin this irreversible process of the opening of data? It is complicated. It is hard, really hard, because in spite of us having certain advantages in the comparison of the civil sector, we are inside, we are part of the self-governance bodies, but still it's hard. During one of the meetings with data owners, I heard a genius phrase which I really like to quote. One of the directors of the communal enterprises, during the meeting, he's saying, "Who told you that public data can be published?" So it was hard to answer anything. Still we have the law, but still they have certain fear that they will publish, it will be analyzed, and they will find something differently or maybe misinterpreted. Some of the communal enterprises are even afraid of the competition which can emerge because they think that they will lose in the bids with the business. Of course, it's not that easy. How we managed to do that? First of all, the political will, which gives lots of opportunities, and the second one, or maybe it should be the first one, is the team, the people, which in spite of anything, in spite of some stupid phrases we can hear from the authorities, in spite of everything, they're coming to work every day and doing that. Part of the work is delegated for them, and not all of the data owners are capable to clean the data on their own, to publish them. So we are trying to help them in that. A bit we're trying to teach other owners how to do that, and the small victory for the team was that sometimes the managers are coming and on their own and asking, "Can we publish this on your portal?" We don't have to convince them. This is already the victory for us. This is an unmeasurable victory as for the KPI, but still it's a great victory which is internal for us. As for the resources, well, in fact, the resources are not that much needed, as you can think. In the beginning, before entering this process, this is the provision of the organizational capability for the team. It's the platform, the portal. I think that there's no sense to tell you about the open source portals and that they're free. Everybody knows that already. So the minimum, but still regulations and law legislation base for you to have some foundations to knock in all the doors and say that it's really needed. Of course, the decree of the Cabinet of Ministers does a lot, but still the local regulations base and law base, which we're trying to link with, is much more important than the decree itself. Thank you so much, Elena. I've got a question for Richard. You're working in lots of countries, Richard, and you definitely know why the cities should join this charter, what it gives them, what do they benefit. Maybe you have a wholesome notion what's the value of the local data, the data of the cities.
They get from joining the charter is having something that they can point to that has international standing. A sort of legitimacy, a sense of a common purpose. This is the bigger aim that we're building towards. And it's really important to do that with local data because local services are the things that really touch people's lives. You know, if you want to see change happen in the world and you want to see the benefits of government reform, so often that means seeing the reform on a local level because that's the roads that you drive along, it's the parks that you go in, it's the services that you interact with day to day. And so opening up the data around those services can really impact people's lives and impact how they interact with the state. It just turns round that sense of government is something that is imposed onto you into something that is more participatory and is easier to work with.
Richard, thank you so much. Richard mentioned the services. So maybe Vinnytsia has something to boast with, knowing the services from Vinnytsia. So the open data, that's why you opened them, to create new services, to create new products in the format of open data. Can you tell us how do you use open data in Vinnytsia now? Well, first of all, before usage of open data, you need to have the audit of these data to check them, to verify them. Secondly, we need to teach people which publish those data sets, because it's really important. I do remember, and I really like to quote those people who had speeches before me, Mr. Mod told that sometimes the state officials don't even imagine what a big bulk of data they have. I can even add, sometimes some of the state officials really do know what a pile of data they have. So if we're speaking about the verification, if we speak about the usage of those data sets to work with them later on, the key then element is a human being. To teach a person is really important. And then we're having the stage of creation of services to work with these data sets for them to be usable, for them to be totally usable for the people. For me personally, first of all, I really like the business requests as for the data, and for me personally, it's the main indicator for us. When we have the request from the business, these data can be published instantly, because it will create a nice competitive environment for no one to win from some exclusive ownership of these data. And secondly, we will publish these data which are relevant, which are needed. The cooperation with the civil society as for the defining of the priority data sets, we don't want to spam with this data. We don't want to, I'd say, to overload our people for them to prepare tons of data. We are living in the informational era. We are producing terabytes and petabytes of data which needs to be stored somewhere. So there's a question of priorities. For me personally, I really like if it's a business request, because it's the economy of the city, it's the added value which is staying there, and this is the practical usage of the data we already have. And as for the services, I've already mentioned that now the Department of Informational Technologies of the City Council is working upon the creation of the portal of open data, in spite of already the publishing of the big data sets we have already done on the whole nation portals. You can see any data on the site of the Vinnytsia City Council. Is already the financial reports published for the communal enterprises. So everybody understands what are the problems with the communal enterprises and how we sometimes need to overcome this oppression, but not some oppression because they try to hide something. First of all, it's because they don't understand which amount of data they've got. And secondly, they are afraid that they can harm someone with these data. So really, we have to provide some educational work, first of all, which is relevant for the city. Thank you so much, Mr. Vladyslav. And, well, in fact, I'd like to inform that Chernivtsi and Vinnytsia are the public projects in our TEPAS project, which foresees the work with the cities in the audit of data, the defining of the priority data sets, and the support in the development of the portal and joining the Charter of Open Data, an international charter, and the creation of some product as for the data. So I'd like to ask Chernivtsi representative, because those are your first steps in the development of the policy of open data. What are the challenges the city faces, and the city businesses and the NGO sector community faces in the development of open data? What are the obstacles, how to overcome them? Well, just before answering, I'll give the short remark as for the first steps. Thanks to Nadiia Babynska, who is from Chernivtsi, their steps are not the first ones, because she always headed the development of the city for the openness and accessible and useful information. And even before we became participants of the project, we still were publishing part of the data on the official web portal of the City Council. And now we are preparing to issue and publish the data on the separate portal of open data. As for the challenges, as for the obstacles, I don't think that I would say something new, because lots of these issues have already been uttered in this discussion. But the biggest challenge for me is, which we are facing already in the job, is that the construction of this community and the upbuilding of the trust of people for the open data, the construction of the culture of open data. And now I'm speaking about two sides, both about the producers of the data, about the managers of information, and about the users, the consumers of the information. So it's really important that what already was told by Richard at one of the trainings, master classes, that you always have to find the interested people, the people who live, those flag officers who live in the open data matter, in the useful nature of this open data. They will do everything to develop this culture. Yes, it's really true, because very often we hear, why do we have to publish that? Why do we have to publish this data set? People lack understanding, and this is the most complicated. But we do understand it's a process, and this is a long-term process. We can't just make everything for a month or even for a year. We can't change the attitude towards the data of many people. That's why it's gradual steps. When we thought which data should be the first to be published, the first thing we did was we were meeting the active residents of the city, with civil organizations, with the journalists, with the people who will need the data first of all. who will be able to use this data at the first place. I don't think I'll surprise you with the responses which type of data was named. Of course, everything which was about the city building, the spatial building, space of the building, and the quality of education and healthcare. People want to get to know more about the spheres, and of course the transport. I forgot about the transport. So people want to get to know more information about the spheres where they see that there are certain problems, where something is wrong. So we're trying to gather these data and to publish them. But we do understand that it's only the top of the iceberg. So this is the data which will show the current situation, but they won't let us make decisions as for the development. They won't let us make the decision what to do and how to improve this or that situation. So this culture, communications, and we need to bring up the new generation of people who would support the idea of data and would be ready to use them in the same way to publish and to help its publications. Maybe the colleagues have anything to add about the challenges the cities face as for the implementation of the policy. Olena, please. Well, yeah, there are lots of challenges. One of these challenges is maybe I'd like to emphasize upon is that sometimes we forget about the middle. We are speaking about the high political will on the level of the governance of the city, deputies, and we're speaking about the team, the people who are doing that every day. But there are some of the managers, the people who are sitting on this pile of data. Sometimes they lack this real understanding of the importance and need of these data. They could be some skeptical for the high political will. The decision is adopted. You hear that, Mr. Vladyslav? They're skeptical, yeah. So, the decision of some solutions of the session of the parliament, okay, they adopted that, but nobody will execute it. Okay, there are some people who try to do that. Maybe those several people really need it because they try to follow some of the personal aims, but we don't need it. There will be some time passing, they will forget about that. We won't have a need to renew this data. So to convince them in the importance of all of that is really complicated. This is a very important challenge. And then to form a stable demand for the data, which will give the response for the question why it exists. Who needs that? I'm not sure, of course, that this way we chose is the right one, but still, we'll try to provoke this demand on our own. There is a great potential for the development of the trend of not only of the culture, but of the governance of the data, but the culture of the governments knowing the data, taking some of the important governmental decisions, using the budgets for the previous years, different expenses, the efficiency of those expenses, even with the minimum of analysis, these data can show the results, and using them, we've got this demand finally. So Olena said that there is the lack of political will. What will Vinnytsia do if there will be the lack of political will? Well, first of all, Vinnytsia will never have the lack of political will. First of all. Secondly, I can recall, as the mirror of what you said, I'm a new person in the self-governance. I worked in the business before, so I know the insights from the ministries. If the new minister came to some ministry, the executors, the performers, not even the middle management, but the main specialists, they even made bets. How long he will do that, for half a year, for 9 months, or maybe he will leave. So when we have the head of this process, this is the question of political will, the question of inexhaustible political will, which should be a founding thing. And I can always remember about the 2008 year when Volodymyr Groysman began to force everyone to use computers. He made people to use the e-document turnover. He banned to print out. He had certain limitations for this or that. And then he claimed the people to sign the documents electronically. When I came here in the morning, I could see that today, during this executive meeting, I signed 3 decrees. While I came here, I read them and signed them, and that was it. For us, here in 2017, it's totally natural, but in 2008, it was, I don't know, it would like to convince Trump to sign Paris documents, you know? So, lots of things depend on the first person, how this person forms his or her attitude towards it, how his or she is consequent in his or her steps, and has certain gap space for interpretations. Thank you so much, Mr. Vladyslav, but besides the political will, you still need some of the finance, some of the funds to open and develop open data. Yes, the money, yes. So we were mentioning that we don't need large resources, but still we know that budget and the city council can use the money only according to the assignment, so we have to foresee it in the budget. In Vinnytsia, in the program of the e-governments, there are certain funds foreseen. Lviv has it, but Chernivtsi will have it foreseen. Well, I do hope. Moreover, we'd like to foresee the money for hackathons for us to use this data with maximum efficiency. I'm interested with the situation in the Dnipro City Council. Are you planning to invest into the data of the city, because it's the resource which really needs certain funds? Yes, I wanted to mention that. Yes, we've got some program of informatization where we have the certain budget about certain events. For 2017, we don't have not a single penny for the development, for certain technical support, and I will explain why. Because the ideology of the creation, the joining to the charter, the work with the open data has emerged not that long ago. Not even the dialogue, but the initiative itself. As for the portal, as it was mentioned by Olena, our very good volunteer helped us to create it. We tried to fill it on our own. We created the design, and you don't need money for that, according to my own experience. We are having 2 more people in our department who deal with open data. They check all the information, all the data which is being sent by the owners and managers of the information, and then they publish it on our portal. I'd like to say that now, especially for 2017, we are planning the budget. For 2018, we don't see the sense to put any of the budget costs. There's no. We have the portal. We have the colleagues who get their salaries as the workers of the Department of Informational Technologies. We don't need any technical support. We had only certain costs to create the services which were based on the open data. Only for the creation, the development, modernization and implementation, yes, we had certain expenses, but for the work itself, for the functioning and publication, no, not at all. Thank you so much. This is the person who created the portal of open data in Dnipro. He's here. He's Kirilo Zakharov. Kirilo, are you here? Yes, he's here. So he is the trainer of the TAPAS project on the open data, and Katerina from open data team from TAPAS. She's closely interacting, cooperating with all of the cities and helping to implement the. So coming back to the charter. Still, the charter is not just the document which has been signed by the cities and they said, yeah, we'll do something, but nobody knows what. Of course, you know what, because each city has to develop a certain plan of actions to implement the charter. And these plans of actions to implement the charter is the roadmap for each city, how to develop further on. Mr. Vladyslav reminded me that hackathons will exist and will be funded from the budget, from the city budget, to use the data. And these hackathons is the implementation of one of the principles of the Charter, the inclusiveness, the involvement of the citizens. As far as I know, Lviv has already the adopted plan how to implement the Charter. Could you tell several words about the implementation of those principles? It seems to me there are only 6 of them, but still, to implement them, I don't know how much time you need. How much time would you need, at least to begin this process of implementation of the principles? Well, it's difficult to begin. We've got the plan up till the end of this year and for 2018. We were not trying to plan furthermore because the process in Ukraine and the world is so dynamic and dynamically changing that for 2020, for instance, if we had that strategy, those would be some common framework things, and behind that there would be some precise plan which would be constantly changing. Very often people ask us what this charter gave us, what did we benefit. First of all, it really precisely structured our work. I remember the moment when we adopted the decree of the committee about the joining the charter. Then the month passed and our application was approved. One moment I had a feeling, what I can do more. There is a portal. There is a certain laws and legislation base. How can we create the plan? And these 6 principles really structured in a cool way this work. Not to forget about everything, not to forget about ourselves, about our legislation base and to improve it, about our organizational capabilities, not to forget about our managers and owners of the information, how to work with them, how to train them, how to control them a bit, to control the quality of the data they are publishing, and not to forget that around us there is a community which uses this data, maybe in the primary type, we are just giving data and they're doing something with it, and in the secondary one, as a result of a certain services, applications, I don't know, analytical products and so on. So, to say it very roughly, this is the foundation of our roadmap. We had 23 tasks, if I'm not mistaken, which are divided by quarters, and they are all grouped according to these principles. The first feeling I had after this formation is fear. I didn't know how to implement all of that. But step by step, gradually, I think we'll cope with all of that. Well, the main thing with the open data is not to be afraid to begin, and later on the process will go on and you won't be able to stop. You will... Well, yes, you shouldn't be afraid and just to believe, to have a certain faith. Well, while we have a certain time left, maybe you have some questions for the leaders, because we really have, well, not all of the cities, but at least the representatives of the cities. Yes, Mr. Vladyslav? Can I, while people are thinking about the questions, can I add something? I really like to find certain metaphorical allusions and comparisons. There is a nice joke. A boy is asked, "Do you know how to ride a bicycle?" "I don't know, I never tried. Maybe I can." So, instead of doing this invention, creating something new and thinking of this new bicycle, joining the charter gives us the insight from the people who have already overcome this path. We don't have to think of something new. We can use what was already used, and it reduces this this necessary steps, because we're living in the informational space. We're always having this wonderful distance, which is becoming less and less. We don't have as much time as we had 10 years ago, so the charter is the usage of the previous experience to make it better in a proper way and without any mistakes. And we've got some questions, please. Hello, my name is Helena, I'm from Belarus. Well, we don't have such a good situation as it's in Ukraine, but still, we've got the situation, the process beginning, and I can see that there is such a big problem. The statistics we are having, which is still Soviet, the methodology and the whole method of gathering. So it creates the problems with the quality and the problem of the trust towards this data. How do you solve this problem? Who is ready to answer? Well, as for the statistics and this kind of as you said, Soviet-style statistics. I have an experience of cooperation with our Department of Statistics in the Lviv city, and it's not subordinate to the city itself, it's subordinate to the region and to the State Committee of Statistics and to the Ministry. So, those are old corridors which are scary, and it's rather, I'm frightened to go along them, the same equipment they're working with. So, in some way, I had a certain superstition how we can cooperate with them. But I had a crazy wish to do that because they've got lots of data. So, in fact, we just, during the meeting, we showed the opportunities of cooperation with them. Maybe this is not the open data in the classical sense. It's not raw data. They're not those detailed, but still, this is statistics and they are ready for the cooperation. In spite of there are certain stereotypes as for their, I don't know, a bit obsolete character, it's worth to try to overcome them, it's worth to try to communicate with them, and they turned out to be ready for cooperation. And everything is going not that bad. But if we speak about the information itself, which is gathered by the city council, this structure of the information, it's not interesting. How can we deal with that? You know, it's a cool question. I will answer in Russian. Or can I answer in Ukrainian? Okay. So, I don't remember who, but it seems to me as someone respectful from the financial world. It seems to me one of the IMF directors said a very cool phrase. I have the trust only to the statistics which is falsified by me personally. So the biggest challenge for the Ukrainian cities is the methodology, how to gather this information. I am sure that in all of the cities of Ukraine, still, sometimes in the departments, there are people who are creating tables in Microsoft Word. Spreadsheets, not in Excel, but in Microsoft Word. And they are writing those figures handmade. Yes, and they're doing that in a different way with commas and dots and dashes, of course. So, of course, when we have, first of all, a very precise formulation of the needs, when we finally have the certain understanding about the standards, when we sign those 6 principles, we won't have any other way. We'll have to look at all of the methods of gathering their statistical information. Now we decided to add a special department which will deal with the deepened analysis of the methods how to gather statistical municipal information. So the method of gathering the information is the biggest challenge, not the data itself, but the method of gathering it. I'm sorry, I have 2 more questions, but still, they will kill me. 3 questions, but they will kill me. Those guys, they will kill me if we take too much time. We'll have the coffee break, so you'll have an opportunity to speak with our speakers. So I'd like each of you to sum up, to say a thesis, 1 sentence, why open data is important, a short one. In fact, open data is a new stimulus to the opportunity for the development. It's an opportunity you need to use, an opportunity which we have a nice broad window for usage of this opportunity. So people who haven't still done that, go on, do that, and our city is open to help you. If you need it, please apply. It's a unique opportunity to give the fuel for the local startups to produce new solutions, new systems, new programs, which will satisfy the municipal requirements too. It's a very cool method of the efficient communication with our residents. It's a resource for solving the social problems of the city and improving the level of life of the residents.
I think it's the foundation on which a modern government is built.
І на цих позитивних нотах.
And on those positive notes, I thank everyone. I thank all of the participants of this panel discussion and you for the attention.